Okay, we are live. Welcome to the second half of the second afternoon of the Games Christmas lectures on this rather chilly December afternoon. Now we've got Emma Fallows, who is both a lecturer and a PhD researcher at Tufts University, and Emma is going to be talking about her research into haptics. So, Emma, over to you.
Hello. Hello, everybody. So I thought I'd go through a couple of things really. So one of them being my research, but then the other thing actually covering the little logo you can see on my presentation, which is Mindtrek. So I went to Mindtrek 2022 this year, which was in Finland. It was one of the most amazing experiences. So that was to present my research as well. So I had a paper accepted there, which was one of the biggest achievements, I think, to be fair, in my career so far. So I thought it'd be really fun to show you the presentation that I showed at the conference, and then you can kind of get an insight to, what I do every day, basically. But yeah, so just a little bit of background. I started my PhD in September 2018. I passed my early stage review in 2019, and then I passed my late stage review in June 2020. So I'm currently in the final write-up of my thesis, just trying to get to that last sort of finishing line now, which is an absolute journey in itself, but I am hoping to kind of reach that, very, very soon, and then be able to kind of get the end result that everybody, of course, desires at the end of a degree. So, as a little case study for this research, I wanted to cover the Thornell collection. So this is basically what my project revolves around. And it's a collection consisting of 270 East Asian ceramics. It was bequeathed by the owner, Ernest Thornhill, in 1944 to Stafford University. There's a few reasons why he actually donated that collection. One was to actually protect it during World War II. It was more of a safe location for them to be. But the second reason was it was Thornell's bequest to have the ceramics handled to benefit the education of ceramics. But the only issue with that is that they were valued in 2013, and the sale of one of the most valuable pieces actually fetched 3.6 million for a 590-year-old cup, which you can actually see the image on the screen, which I think is really cool. So it did raise enough funds in 2016 to make a permanent display for the rest of the 269 pieces. But of course, the rationale for this project was Thornhill's legacy. So the problem being that he wanted to display to be able to interact with ceramics and to sort of benefit the education of ceramic history. But after valuing, it was quite clear that they were either too valuable, too fragile. Some of them are very, very, very old pieces. And obviously putting them in a high risk environment, it could lead to them being lost or things like being stolen or damaged. Obviously we want to avoid that, sure, assumedly. So the solution that I wanted to kind of provide with my PhD was through the development of a permanent display. It's now time to explore how earnest wishes can be alternatively fulfilled. So I decided to develop a virtual reality experience of a selection of them Thornhill pieces that have been digitized with a 3D environment. This is through photogrammetry, if anybody's interested. So this also incorporates sensible haptic gloves as well, so visitors can have total freedom to basically handle ceramics and sort of be able to interact with the virtual world around them. So another problem that I noticed was museums' form of displaying artifacts, especially ceramics, are very outdated and usually consist of text panels and audio guides to provide any information whatsoever. Displays lack that technological enhancement, and they're limited in the ways that visitors can actually interact with objects and with history as well. I feel like there is this sort of perceived nature of history almost being slightly boring, especially to younger audiences. And I particularly feel like this is linked to the fact that there isn't enough interaction involved to really engage a range of audiences. So these limitations are impacting the potential to attract younger audiences and new audiences generally through the use of technology. So my solution is implementing interactive virtual reality, providing a multi-sensory dynamic that can explore how context can be communicated. Haptic experiences opens a new world for visitors that wish to gain access to artifacts that are usually seen behind a glass cabinet. So, as for my field research, I went to a few different places, and I went to the British Museum and the Victoria and Albert Museum. And in 2019, it showed limitations in the interactions that you could experience, basically. So I was supported in that statement. Visits to the Royal Delft Museum as well in February 2022 showed that methods that were basically in place to deconstruct the process of creation, which I thought was really, really interesting. So they deconstructed the stages of making perhaps a certain ceramic, and that was a really, really nice way of doing it. However, it's not an engaging way. It's informative and it's visually informative, but not necessarily engaging. So, as for the lit review, the literature review highlighted an interest in implementing technology into museums. However, these usually consisted of guides and walkthroughs with very, very limited interaction. So the idea of most concepts is to provide accessibility to view museums from a remote location and feel immersed in their environment. However, there was a clear lack in focus on the artifacts themselves. So most objects could be zoomed in on, and it limited the users solely to distance visuals. So they weren't really able to fully interact with that object. It didn't even lock on with it. It was just a case of you see it as you're going past in a sort of interactive environment. So most of these experiences also include using a flat screen device as well, so taking away the opportunity for full immersivity. So VR alternatives do exist, but they did not have the addition of other sensory devices as well. So they'd be very limiting generally. That's where you've got me. So this is the Thornhill experience. The practical aim to source the most suitable methods to carry out digitizing the Thornhill ceramics. So the ceramics went through a process called photogrammetry, to create digitized replicas. This then followed with what experiences could engage a visitor to learn about ceramics through the combination of virtual reality and haptic enabling technologies. So these interactions included a close-up one-to-one experience with the ceramics, a tomb to recreate where the ceramics were discovered, a drum to recreate the musician on horseback's instrument, and then a quiz to see what the visitor actually learned from the experiences. And one of the arguably best bits is this simple interaction of grabbing the glass cabinet and smashing it to pieces, because it's this playing on real life. It's playing on the accessibility, like there's no limitation anymore. And I think a lot of people that tried it out really enjoyed that. So as for Sense Glove, arguably the most exciting part of this research is the haptic gloves. So this section relied heavily on a literature review to explore what haptic devices exist. And spoiler alert, it isn't a huge domain at the moment. So it was interesting to see what haptic gloves had been developed at this stage. This was back in about 2018. And this research then decided to use haptic gloves designed by Sense Glove to explore how the limitless sense of touch can enhance the virtual reality experience. So what was really nice about this one is you had that full force feedback, and most of the devices that I looked into kind of had vibrating feedback, or absolutely no feedback whatsoever, but you were able to handle the object, which is very limiting in the way that you actually kind of feel realistic in that sort of sense. So obviously I wanted to explore force feedback so that you could add context to learn about the Thornhill ceramics by actually feeling the forms of an object. So why Sense Glove? Well, I did explain this a little bit just, but Sense Gloves had the ability to offer full force feedback to imitate digital objects' physicalities and mimic the sense of touch. So this was the most realistic version that we could possibly get at the time, if you weren't spending £1,000,000, a lot of money. So this was much more realistic to be able to experiment with. So at the time of choosing the right device for the project, this was the only glove really to offer the full tactile feedback. Sense Glove was the only option as well to have adjustable fitting to make it suitable for a range of testers, which of course, if I want this to be in a museum, assumably you'd want this to be suitable for a range of hands. But there is a development. So we have the Nova Glove now. This came out, I think, if I remember correctly, last year. And now this actually offers a wireless range of accessibility, which I think is obviously a lot nicer than the wired setup that I've been having. It's really nice that you can actually put the glove on in seconds. It's kind of like a sort of gardening glove almost, the way that you just pop it on and it's done, rather than putting each finger on individually, which can be a little bit tedious at times. It's more comfortable because it has stretchy fabric surrounding the hand, and it features voice coil actuators for vibrotactile haptics. So this gives a better sense of textures as well. It's very much a personal preference of which one you would prefer out of the two. I really enjoyed using this one when I went to go and see them at their office in the Netherlands, but I also still really, really like the ones that I've been using for the project. So, as for testing phases, I had a testing phase 1 at the British Ceramics Biennial in September 2021, and this ran for just 1 week. And due to the experience being orientated around ceramics, there was a huge interest in the combination of ceramics and technology. Testing phase 2 was at the Potteries Museum, and this was in November 2021 and ran for just 4 days. The museum posted social media content and advertisements on my project, which was awesome, and a few meetings in person and on Microsoft Teams helped plan and finalize all the details on how it would go ahead. So, as for the data collection, I use Qualtrics in case anybody's interested, which is a web-based survey software tool. It's quick and easy to set up and has tons of options on how participants can respond. And Qualtrics offers instant ways of displaying data, which is very, very useful. It's fair to say that this has come in a lot of use for the data analysis section of my thesis. So, the qualitative data aim to record a player's response and opinion to the experience, and the questions were targeted to answer the second core question in this research. So the results showed an overwhelmingly positive response to the experience and provided evidence that the visitors felt more engaged with ceramics and retained information given to them visually. So the data showed that visitors would feel encouraged to visit a museum if they knew that this sort of technology was installed. So it's fair to say it was quite a successful outcome overall. So when it comes to my methodology, so this methodology involves a practice-based research method, which is to produce a practical outcome that will contribute to new knowledge in the field. So this practical heavily incorporates object analysis frameworks that can be applied to artifacts, and this to deconstruct historic information and represent it through visual and interactive interactions virtually. So this method has been employed to help develop a better understanding of a ceramics historiography and develop a structure on how artifacts basically can be presented virtually whilst interacting with them freely and being able to just have a bit of fun with it. It can be very entertaining at the same time. So, as for the contributions, so this is a nice bit of text, but this research project contributes practically through the development of a reliable system to create digital replicas of ceramics that can serve as surrogate versions. Of course, we can't replace original ceramics, but it's certainly a way of being able to have them as a surrogate and also have them as a form of documentation as well. The good thing about technology is that, granted, nothing being deleted means that they should remain pretty solid or never being lost. But this project exploits the potential of using haptic glove technology and how this can be utilized to enhance a museum visitor's experience and introduce a new dynamic and multisensory experiences that would alternatively be completely forbidden with the original artifacts. So visualization contextualizes the ways visitors can learn about ceramics historiography and the ways this information can be constructed into innovative forms of interaction to appeal to a digital age of learners, but also anybody who was interested. One thing that I found on my data analysis is that the age did not come into it at all. Like, granted, younger people were very, very keen to try it, but when it came to age ranges and who enjoyed it the most, everybody enjoyed it equally. So it was such a big relief that everybody really, really enjoyed it. So I feel like the innovation lies in the opportunity of how history can be interpreted into a digital alternative and the ways visitors can learn through hands-on interaction and multisensory experiences. So these forms of interaction create new concepts to visitors who wish to learn about history through an intimate, hands-on approach. So this technology has the potential to enhance engagement and increase the chances of retaining information. I would say it's much, much nicer to be able to learn from this type of project as opposed to a text panel, and is more inclusive as well, because obviously text panels are usually quite limiting with perhaps 1 to 2 languages at most. So therefore bring in a sense of purpose and evident demand to present various forms of digital heritage into mainstream museums and exhibitions. So that has been my research, and thank you so much for listening.
That's great. Thank you, Emma. Just got a couple of questions coming in. So
Yeah.
Let's have a look. Are there likely to be affordable haptic devices reaching the consumer level in the next few years, do you think?
That's a really good question. And the quick answer to that is yes. So I do feel like haptic gloves are becoming something that is a lot more accessible, I want to say as well, because back in 2018, when I was looking at these haptic devices, there was some that I purely couldn't get because I wasn't like a company. So obviously nowadays you can actually purchase, like for example, the haptic gloves, you can just purchase them on the website. So it's definitely accessible in that sense. And then obviously I know from a fact that they are trying to obviously reach a kind of price range as well. Obviously, it depends on the price range, it depends on the experience. So, if you were to go for example, some haptic gloves that only had vibration as feedback, you would be looking at a lot lower price range than obviously a force feedback.
Hmm.
So, it depends on the gloves that you're after. And the quick answer is yes, it will definitely be accessible in the near future.
Cool. And are museums adopting this technology?
Another really good question. So again, the quick answer is yes, but the only limitation tend to find with that is that most of the time it's exhibition based, so it's like a temporary exhibit that are experimenting with the technology. So what I find is that they're not really implementing these kind of technologies long term, and that's kind of what I'm trying to maybe push for, because I think it would be really nice to be able to try and offer every museum visitor at any time in the year, the ability to obviously interact with history. So it is happening, but it's more experimentation based, I would say.
Cool. I think that's all we have. But thank you, Emma. It was a really fascinating talk, and we look
Thank you.
forward to seeing more of your research in the future.
Awesome. Thank
Th-
you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.